Welcome to The Explainer. You know, if you've ever found yourself totally lost in the noise of a fiery political debate, well, this breakdown is going to show you exactly how these arguments are built. Today, we've got a seriously fascinating and highly charged topic to unpack. We're going to do an objective, structured breakdown of a recent Sky News Australia interview that dives deep into the concept of national identity. It's a fast-paced segment featuring host Andrew Bolt and One Nation MP Barnaby Joyce, and let me tell you, it covers some intense political ground. Our goal today is to just strip away all the noise and look directly at the arguments and the logic they present.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The cultural identity debate. 2. Defining monoculturalism. 3. The Socceroos analogy. And 4. Handling fringe political views. Let's get right into it.
Starting off with Section 1, the cultural identity debate. So, every intense political discussion usually has an inciting incident, right? A spark. Well, this quote right here is our spark. The entire segment is basically framed as a massive pushback against this one specific statement made by Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen. She said, "You can be whoever you want to be, or whatever you want to be, and still be Australian." Both the host and the guest use this exact quote as their launchpad for what they believe is going horribly wrong with the current discourse on Australian culture.
Now notice how MP Barnaby Joyce completely attacks the literal interpretation of the Premier's statement. He argues that saying you can be whatever you want to be is actually really dangerous. Why? Because taken literally, it creates this huge loophole for extreme or even violent ideologies to exist right under the umbrella of Australian identity. To drive this home, he uses some extremely charged counterexamples. He throws out hypotheticals like, what if someone believes people of Dutch descent should be harmed? Or what if they endorse violence against Catholics, Protestants, or Hindus? Then, he points to a real-world example brought up by the host, citing the fact that a larger number of Australian Muslims joined the Islamic State terrorist army than joined the Australian Army. So the core argument they're making here is that a society literally cannot tolerate absolutely any belief system and still survive, which begs the question, if being whatever you want isn't the answer according to the source material, what exactly is the political alternative they are offering?
That brings us to Section 2, defining Australian monoculturalism.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this segment focuses heavily on Pauline Hanson's controversial call for monoculturalism. How they actually define this polarizing term is super important. Barnaby Joyce specifically defines it not as racial exclusivity, but as a single, unifying Australian culture, bounded by really firm guardrails. According to this framework, you absolutely have the capacity to hold different private beliefs, you can come from different races and follow different creeds, but only as long as you abide by these overarching cultural guardrails.
So let's look at what those exact guardrails are. The guest lists specific behavioral and cultural expectations that, in his view, absolutely must override any conflicting cultural practices or religious interpretations. We're talking about strict egalitarianism, meaning no caste or class systems that rank the value of people, period. It includes an inherent, unwavering commitment to the advancement of the Australian people and an obligation to give more than you take. It's a strict framework. Honestly, almost like a terms of service agreement for a unified society where public expectations overrule literal interpretations of anything else. Whether you're talking about extreme historical practices like the Incas or specific, literal interpretations of religious texts like the Quran. If a belief falls outside these guardrails, the argument is simple. You are just not participating in the unified culture.
Moving into Section 3, the Socceroos team analogy.
Look, explaining abstract political philosophy can be pretty dry, right? So the host introduces a really tangible metaphor to make it easier to grasp: the Australian national soccer team, the Socceroos. Here's how it works. Step 1. The players come from incredibly diverse backgrounds. They might be African, Muslim, or have come from refugee camps. Step 2. But when it's game time, they all put on the exact same Australian jersey. Step 3. The team works strictly for a common purpose under a common banner. As Joyce points out, players don't run onto the field wearing completely different jerseys, and they definitely don't start kicking the ball into their own goal to help the opponent.
And this brilliantly illustrates their ultimate conclusion: a strict separation of the private and the public. At home, you have private multiculturalism, meaning you can represent diverse backgrounds and religions all you want. But out in public, you have public monoculturalism. You are part of one team, with one set of values, one flag, and one uniform. This is exactly how the host and guest reconcile their desire for a unified national culture with the reality of a highly diverse population.
Which leads us to Section 4, Handling Fringe Political Views.
Up to this point, the host and guest have been entirely in sync, just agreeing across the board. But suddenly, the host introduces a massive complication into this debate about shared values and logical guardrails. He brings up One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts, accusing him of acting like a complete cook and spouting ugly conspiracy theories. The host specifically tables two claims. First, regarding the atmosphere, that the senator is open to the existence of chemtrails in Australia, and second, on a geopolitical level, that globalists are entrenched in Ukraine and actually control Russia. The host's underlying challenge to Joyce is clear. Do these fringe theories actually fit within the unified logical guardrails of Australian culture we just spent the entire interview defining?
So, how does the guest handle this incredibly direct challenge about a colleague? Well, he pivots completely. He moves entirely away from the strict unified culture argument and leans 100% into the principle of absolute free speech. Joyce outright refuses to condemn his colleague, or, in his own words, throw him under a bus. Instead, he cites the incredible liberty to speak one's mind within the One Nation Party. He fully acknowledges that allowing this level of freedom absolutely comes at a steep price when it hits the media, but he fiercely defends the senator's absolute right to express his views, even if he personally doesn't share that mindset. The host, however, he's not having it. Delivering what is frankly an unvarnished, brutal pushback, he says this: "He would be far better to keep his mouth shut than let us see what sticks and bird shit are all in that mind of his." Wow. That harsh reaction perfectly captures a very real internal conflict happening right now within conservative political media. It's this intense tension between demanding a strictly unified, logical national culture and deciding what to do when your own political allies utilize absolute free speech to promote extreme fringe theories. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought to take away from this explainer. We've seen some very powerful arguments for public monoculturalism and strict cultural guardrails, but we've also seen the immediate defense of a colleague's right to say whatever they want, no matter how fringe the idea might be. So here's the question. How does a political movement effectively enforce a strictly unified monocultural public identity while simultaneously defending absolute free speech for fringe conspiracy theories within its very own ranks? It's a massive contradiction, isn't it? And decoding tensions like this is exactly why it's so important to look past the noise of modern political rhetoric. Thank you so much for joining me for this breakdown. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.